Mother Bear delivered the baby's pacifier from the cafeteria floor. What happened next was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning sun cast long shadows across Pine Valley Cafeteria as Meredith Blackwood adjusted her 8-month-old daughter's bib for the third time. Little Rosalind had a gift for turning every meal into an art project, and today was no different. The cafeteria buzzed with the usual weekend crowd, families with sticky-fingered children, elderly couples sharing coffee and newspapers, and a few solo diners lost in their phones. Meredith's husband, Jasper, returned from the counter carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee and a plate of pancakes cut into tiny pieces for Rosalind. The baby squealed with delight when she saw the food, her chubby hands immediately reaching for the nearest piece. Her pink pacifier bobbed in her mouth as she chewed, making soft gurgling sounds that melted Meredith's heart every time. "She's getting so big," Jasper whispered, settling into his chair. His voice carried that familiar mix of pride and disbelief that came with new parenthood. "Remember when she was so small she could barely hold her head up?" Meredith nodded, watching as Rosalind grabbed another piece of pancake with surprising coordination. The morning felt perfect. Warm sunlight streaming through the large windows, the comfortable chatter of other families, and their daughters' infectious giggles filling the air around their small table. The Pine Valley Cafeteria sat just at the edge of town, where civilization met the wild. Behind the building, dense forest stretched for miles, home to deer, rabbits, and occasionally larger creatures that most people preferred to observe from a distance. The cafeteria's large patio doors stayed open during nice weather, creating an almost seamless transition between the indoor dining area and the natural world beyond. Rosalind had finished most of her breakfast when she discovered something far more entertaining than food: her pacifier. She pulled it from her mouth and held it up to the light, watching how the pink plastic caught the sun's rays. The simple toy fascinated her in the way that only babies could be fascinated by everyday objects. "Look at her studying that thing," Jasper chuckled, reaching over to wipe syrup from Rosalind's chin. You'd think she'd never seen it before. That's when it happened. With a sudden burst of baby energy, Rosalind flung her arm wide, sending the pacifier flying in a perfect arc across their table. Both parents lunged forward, but they were too late. The pacifier bounced once on the tile floor and rolled several feet away, coming to rest near the open patio doors where the indoor tiles met the outdoor concrete. "I'll get it," Meredith sighed, starting to stand up. But before she could take a single step, something extraordinary occurred that would change everything they thought they knew about the boundary between human and wild. A massive shadow fell across the patio doors. At first, Meredith thought it might be a large dog that had wandered onto the property. But as her eyes adjusted to the contrast between the bright sunlight outside and the dimmer interior, she realized with a shock that sent ice through her veins. This was no dog. A full-grown black bear stood just outside the patio doors, her thick fur gleaming in the morning sun. She was enormous, easily 300 pounds, with powerful shoulders and paws the size of dinner plates. But what made Meredith's breath catch in her throat wasn't just the bear's size. It was what the animal was doing. The bear had lowered her massive head toward the ground where Rosalind's pacifier lay. With movements so gentle they seemed impossible for such a large creature, she nudged the small pink object with her snout. The bear's dark eyes, intelligent and calm, seemed to assess the situation with an almost human-like understanding. Around the cafeteria, other patrons began to notice. Conversations died mid-sentence. Coffee cups paused halfway to lips. A child's laughter cut off abruptly as his mother pulled him closer to her chest. The normal sounds of a busy restaurant faded into an eerie silence, broken only by the soft scraping of the bear's claws against concrete as she moved. Jasper's hand found Meredith's arm, his grip tight enough to leave marks. Neither of them dared to move, to breathe too loudly, to do anything that might startle the massive animal now holding their daughter's pacifier in her mouth. Rosalind, oblivious to the tension radiating from every adult in the room, clapped her hands together and let out a delighted squeal at the sight of the big doggy outside. The bear's ears twitched at the sound, and for a moment that felt like an eternity, her eyes met Meredith's through the glass. There was something in that gaze. Not the wild, unpredictable look Meredith might have expected, but something deeper. Something that made her think of her own fierce protectiveness over Rosalind. Then, moving with the same careful precision she had used to pick up the pacifier, the bear began to walk forward, straight toward their table, straight toward their baby daughter who was reaching out with tiny hands, completely unafraid of the wild creature approaching her. The massive bear took one deliberate step onto the patio, then another. Her enormous paws made almost no sound against the concrete, as if she understood the need for quiet in this strange moment. The pink pacifier remained gently held in her mouth, looking impossibly small against her powerful jaws. Every person in the cafeteria seemed frozen in time, watching this unprecedented scene unfold. Meredith felt her heart hammering so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. Her maternal instincts screamed at her to grab Rosalind and run, but something deeper held her in place. The bear's movements weren't aggressive or threatening. There was a purposefulness to her actions that spoke of intelligence, of decision-making that went beyond simple animal behavior. "Should we?" Jasper whispered, his voice barely audible. He hadn't finished the question because he didn't know how to finish it. Should they run? Should they stay still? Should they trust that this impossible moment would end safely? The bear paused just 3 feet from their table. This close, Meredith could see the individual strands of fur on her massive chest, could notice the small scars on her snout that told stories of a life lived in the wild. The animal's breathing was slow and controlled, her dark eyes moving from Meredith to Jasper and finally settling on little Rosalind. What happened next defied everything Meredith thought she knew about wild animals. The bear lowered her great head toward the table and, with extraordinary gentleness, placed the pacifier on the surface just inches from Rosalind's high chair. The movement was so careful, so deliberate, that it felt almost ceremonial. Rosalind giggled and reached for her returned pacifier, her small fingers brushing against the bear's massive snout as she did. The touch lasted only a second, but in that moment something magical occurred. The bear's eyes softened, and she let out the softest rumble, not a growl, but something that sounded almost like contentment. "Oh my God," a woman whispered from across the restaurant. "She's not trying to hurt the baby. She's helping." The realization rippled through the crowd like water. Phones appeared as people began recording this extraordinary encounter, but even their excitement felt hushed, as if everyone understood they were witnessing something sacred. But the story was far from over. As Rosalind secured her pacifier and looked up at the bear with wonder-filled eyes, a small movement at the patio's edge caught Meredith's attention. Another shape emerged from the tree line, smaller, fluffier, and unmistakably young. A bear cub, probably no more than 6 months old, tumbled onto the patio with the clumsy enthusiasm that only baby animals possessed. The mother bear's head snapped toward her offspring, and for the first time since this encounter began, she showed signs of anxiety. Her protective instincts flared as she saw her cub approaching the humans, just as Meredith's own protective feelings surged, watching this new development unfold so close to her daughter. The cub, however, seemed as curious about the humans as Rosalind was about the bears. He approached the table with bouncing steps, his tiny nose twitching as he caught scent of the pancake syrup and butter that still lingered on Rosalind's hands and face. His fur was lighter than his mother's, a rich brown that caught the sunlight and made him look like a living teddy bear. Rosalind dropped her pacifier again, but this time it was intentional. She leaned forward in her high chair, making the soft cooing sounds she usually reserved for her favorite stuffed animals. The cub's ears perked up at the gentle noises, and he moved closer, drawn by the baby's obvious friendliness. "This is impossible," Jasper breathed, his scientific mind struggling to process what he was seeing. As a biology teacher, he knew bear behavior, knew that mother bears were fiercely protective and generally avoided human contact. Yet here was a mother bear who had not only approached humans but had actively helped them. And now both she and her cub were engaging in what could only be described as interspecies communication with his infant daughter. The mother bear positioned herself between her cub and the rest of the cafeteria, but she didn't interfere as the young bear sniffed curiously at the high chair's base. Her stance was protective, but not aggressive, like a parent supervising a playdate in unfamiliar territory. Then something occurred that would become the heart of this incredible story. Rosalind, in her innocent generosity, picked up a piece of pancake from her tray and dropped it toward the cub. The small morsel landed just within the young bear's reach, and after a moment's hesitation he tasted it. His reaction was immediate and adorable. His whole body seemed to wiggle with pleasure at the sweet flavor. The mother bear watched this exchange with what Meredith could only describe as amusement. Her great head tilted slightly, and that soft rumbling sound came again. She seemed to understand that her cub was in no danger from this generous human baby, and more surprisingly, she seemed to approve of the interaction. Other patrons in the cafeteria were now openly weeping at the beauty of the scene. An elderly man near the window wiped tears from his eyes as he watched Rosalind continue to share her breakfast with the bear cub. A teenage girl held her phone with shaking hands, trying to capture every moment while her own tears blurred her vision. But the most amazing part was yet to come. As the cub finished the pancake piece, he looked up at Rosalind with what appeared to be gratitude. Then, in a move that surprised everyone, including his mother, he gently placed one small paw on the base of the high chair and made a soft chirping sound, the bear equivalent of a thank you. Rosalind clapped her hands in delight, and the sound seemed to signal something to the mother bear. She moved closer to the table, and for one breathtaking moment the massive wild animal and the tiny human baby looked directly at each other. In that gaze, Meredith saw recognition, understanding, and something that looked remarkably like mutual respect. The bear mother then did something that no one could have predicted. She reached out with one enormous paw and, with incredible gentleness, touched the side of Rosalind's high chair. Not the baby herself, but the chair, a gesture that seemed to acknowledge the boundary between wild and domestic while still making contact. It was as if she was saying, "I see you, little one, and I recognize the love that protects you." The moment stretched on, filled with wonder and magic that seemed to suspend the normal rules of the world. Two mothers, one human, one wild, sharing an understanding that transcended species, united by their love for their young ones. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the encounter started to shift. The mother bear lifted her great head and sniffed the air. Her ears twitched, and her posture changed subtly. Something had caught her attention, something the humans couldn't detect, but that her wild senses picked up immediately. The cub, still enchanted by Rosalind's friendship, seemed reluctant to leave. He made small protesting sounds as his mother nudged him gently but firmly away from the table. But the mother bear's instincts were telling her it was time to go, and she began to guide her offspring back toward the tree line. As they moved away, Rosalind called out in her baby language, waving her small hand in what looked like a goodbye. The cub actually turned back once, as if he too was reluctant to end this magical encounter. The mother bear paused at the edge of the patio and looked back at the human family one final time. In that last look, Meredith saw something that would stay with her forever, a wild animal's acknowledgement of the love and protection she felt for her own child. It was a moment of connection that bridged the gap between two completely different worlds, united by the universal experience of motherhood. But as the bears disappeared into the forest, Meredith noticed something that made her blood run cold. There, at the tree line where the bears had emerged, she caught a glimpse of something that didn't belong. A flash of bright orange fabric, the kind worn by hunters. And she realized with growing horror why the mother bear's protective instincts had suddenly kicked in, why she had hurried her cub away from their magical moment. Someone was out there in the woods. Someone who might not understand or appreciate the incredible gentleness they had just witnessed. Someone who might see a mother bear and her cub as nothing more than targets. The cafeteria remained silent for several heartbeats after the bears vanished into the trees. Then, like a dam breaking, everyone began talking at once. Voices rose in excitement, disbelief, and wonder as people tried to process what they had just witnessed. Phones buzzed as videos were shared, messages sent, and calls made to friends and family who would never believe this story without proof. But Meredith couldn't focus on the chatter around her. Her eyes remained fixed on that spot in the tree line where she had seen the orange fabric. The magical moment had been shattered by the realization that those gentle, intelligent creatures might be in danger. "Did you see that?" she whispered to Jasper, grabbing his arm. "The orange. Someone's out there." Jasper followed her gaze, and his face paled as understanding dawned. "Hunting season," he said quietly. "I forgot it started this week." The weight of that realization settled over them like a heavy blanket. The mother bear who had shown such incredible kindness. The playful cub who had shared such a pure moment with their daughter, they were now being hunted. The thought made Meredith's stomach turn. Rosalind, still blissfully unaware of any danger, continued to babble happily in her high chair. She kept looking toward the forest, as if expecting her new friends to return. Every few seconds she would make the same cooing sound she had used to communicate with the cub, her tiny voice calling out in a language that transcended species. "We have to do something," Meredith said, her voice stronger now. The maternal protectiveness she felt for Rosalind had somehow extended to include the bear family they had just met. "We can't just sit here knowing someone might hurt them." Before Jasper could respond, a new voice joined their conversation. An older woman from the next table had overheard them and leaned closer, her eyes bright with concern. "I saw it too," the woman said. Her name tag read Dorothy, and she had the weathered hands of someone who had spent her life working outdoors. "That orange jacket. Been hunting these woods for 40 years, and I've never seen anything like what just happened here. That mama bear, she was special. They both were." Dorothy's voice carried the authority of someone who understood the forest and its inhabitants. She gestured toward the tree line where the bears had disappeared. "Those hunters, they won't care about what we just saw. To them, it's just another bear. They won't understand that this one's different." More people began joining their conversation. A young father, holding his own toddler, nodded grimly. "My boy was terrified of dogs until he saw that cub being so gentle. Now look at him." He gestured to his son, who was making soft animal sounds and looking hopefully toward the forest. An elderly man with kind eyes and a walking cane shuffled over. "I've lived in Pine Valley my whole life. 83 years come December. Never seen a wild animal show that kind of understanding. That kind of humanity, I guess you'd call it. That bear, she knew exactly what she was doing when she brought back your baby's pacifier." As more people shared their thoughts, a plan began forming in Meredith's mind. But before she could voice it, a commotion outside caught everyone's attention. Through the large windows, they could see a pickup truck bouncing down the dirt road that led to the hunting trails. The vehicle was loaded with gear, and even from this distance they could make out the bright orange vests of the occupants. "They're heading straight for where the bears went," Dorothy said grimly. "We've got maybe 10 minutes before they start tracking." That's when Meredith made a decision that would change the course of this entire day. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I'm going out there," she announced. "I'm going to warn them." Jasper stared at his wife in shock. "Meredith, you can't be serious. Those are wild animals. What happened here was incredible, but they're still dangerous." "Are they?" Meredith challenged. "That mother bear could have hurt Rosalind at any point. She was close enough, strong enough. Instead, she helped us. She connected with us, and now someone wants to kill her for it." The emotion in Meredith's voice was raw and powerful. Around the cafeteria, other patrons nodded in agreement. The magical encounter had affected everyone who witnessed it, creating an unexpected bond between the human observers and the bear family. Dorothy stood up as well, her weathered face set with determination. "I'm going with you. I know these woods better than anyone, and I know where that mama bear likes to den. If we can get there first, maybe we can, I don't know, create some kind of distraction." "This is crazy," Jasper said. But even as he spoke, he was unbuckling Rosalind from her high chair. "But I'm not letting you go alone." Other patrons began offering to help. The young father said he could call the local wildlife authorities. The elderly man promised to try reaching the park rangers. Even some of the teenagers volunteered to spread word on social media, hoping to create enough attention that the hunters might think twice about their plans. But as they organized their impromptu rescue mission, none of them noticed the figure who had been sitting quietly in the corner booth throughout the entire encounter. He was a man in his 50s, wearing a simple flannel shirt and jeans, with calloused hands wrapped around a coffee cup that had long since gone cold. His name was Thomas Creek, and he had been watching everything with an intensity that went beyond mere curiosity. When the bear family had appeared, his entire body had gone rigid with recognition. When the magical interaction between the cub and the baby had unfolded, tears had streamed down his weathered cheeks. And when the talk turned to hunters and danger, something fierce and protective had awakened in his chest. Thomas knew something that none of the other cafeteria patrons knew. Something that would add an entirely new dimension to this already incredible story. The mother bear they had all fallen in love with wasn't just any bear. She was Luna, and 3 years ago she had saved his life. It had been during the worst blizzard in Pine Valley's recorded history. Thomas had been hiking when the storm hit, and he had gotten lost in the whiteout conditions. Hypothermia was setting in, and he was sure he was going to die alone in those woods. That's when Luna had found him. She had been younger then, without a cub, but even then she had shown that same unusual intelligence and compassion. Instead of avoiding the human in distress, she had led him to a small cave where he could shelter from the storm. She had even brought him pine boughs to insulate against the cold ground. Thomas had survived that night because of her kindness, and he had never forgotten it. Now, hearing people talk about hunting Luna and her cub, Thomas felt a rage building inside him that he hadn't experienced since his military days. He stood up slowly, his movement drawing attention from the group of would-be rescuers. "You won't need to go looking for those bears," he said quietly, his voice carrying across the now silent cafeteria. "I know exactly where they are, and I know why that mother bear helped your baby." All eyes turned to Thomas as he walked toward Meredith and Jasper's table. His presence seemed to command respect, and even Rosalind stopped her babbling to look at this new person with wide, curious eyes. "That bear has a name," Thomas continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Luna, and 3 years ago, she saved my life." The revelation hit the room like a thunderbolt. Thomas went on to tell his story, describing the blizzard, the hypothermia, and Luna's incredible act of cross-species rescue. As he spoke, the magnitude of what they were dealing with became clear. This wasn't just any bear family. This was a mother bear with a proven history of helping humans in need. "She recognized something in your daughter," Thomas said to Meredith. "The same thing she recognized in me when I was dying in those woods. Vulnerability, maybe, innocence, the need for protection. Luna doesn't just help because she has to. She helps because she chooses to." Dorothy wiped tears from her eyes. "A bear who saves people, and now people want to hunt her. There's something wrong with this world." But Thomas wasn't finished. "There's more you need to know," he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Luna's cub isn't her first. She had another one 2 years ago, a little female who was just as friendly and curious as the one you met today." The silence in the cafeteria was deafening as everyone waited for Thomas to continue. "That cub was shot by hunters," he said finally. "Killed right in front of Luna, just for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Luna carried her dead baby for 3 days before finally letting her go. I found them both by the old creek bed, Luna mourning over her little one like any mother would." The emotional impact of this revelation was devastating. Several people in the cafeteria began crying openly. Meredith pulled Rosalind closer to her chest, imagining the horror of losing a child and understanding Luna's grief on a visceral level. "So, when Luna approached your daughter today," Thomas continued, "when she was so gentle and careful, it wasn't just kindness, it was courage. She was choosing to trust humans again, despite losing her first cub to human violence. She was choosing to believe that not all people are cruel." The weight of responsibility settled on everyone in the room. They had been given a gift, the trust of a creature who had every reason to hate humans but chose love instead. And now that same creature was in danger once again. Thomas looked directly at Meredith. "If you're serious about protecting Luna and her cub, I'll help you. I know these woods better than anyone, and I know where she goes when she's scared. But we have to move fast." Outside, the sound of the hunter's truck had faded, but everyone knew they were out there, setting up their blinds and loading their weapons. The magical morning in the Pine Valley cafeteria had taken a dark turn, and the race to save Luna and her cub was about to begin. But there was one more twist that none of them could have anticipated. As Thomas finished his story and the group prepared to head into the woods, a small sound came from the tree line. A familiar chirping noise that made everyone freeze. The bear cub had returned, and he wasn't alone. Following closely behind the young bear was a small figure that made everyone in the cafeteria gasp in unison. A little girl, no more than 4 years old, with tangled blonde hair and dirt-stained clothes. She walked with the confidence of someone who had been in the forest many times before, her small hand occasionally reaching down to touch the cub's fur as they moved together. "Sweet Mother of God," Dorothy whispered, her hand flying to her heart. "Is that child walking with a wild bear cub like it's a pet dog?" The little girl appeared completely at ease with her unusual companion. She giggled as the cub bumped against her leg, and when he stopped to sniff at something interesting, she waited patiently for him to finish before continuing forward. It was clear this wasn't their first adventure together. Thomas stood frozen at the window, his face pale with recognition. That's Willow Henderson," he said slowly. "She went missing 3 days ago. The whole county's been searching for her." The name hit several people in the cafeteria like a physical blow. The missing child case had been all over the local news. 4-year-old Willow Henderson had wandered away from her grandmother's house during a family gathering and simply vanished into the forest. Search teams with dogs, helicopters, and hundreds of volunteers had been combing the woods with no success. And here she was, walking calmly out of the forest with a bear cub like they were the best of friends. Meredith felt her legs go weak. She's been surviving in the woods for 3 days? With the bears? As if to answer her question, Luna emerged from the tree line behind the unlikely pair. The mother bear moved with the same protective awareness she had shown with her own cub, positioning herself where she could watch for danger while keeping the human child in her sight. Her massive form dwarfed little Willow, yet the child showed no fear whatsoever. "Luna's been taking care of her," Thomas breathed, his voice filled with wonder and disbelief. She didn't just lose a cub to hunters, she found a replacement, a human cub. The implications of this revelation rippled through the cafeteria. Luna hadn't just been mourning her lost baby. She had been healing by protecting another vulnerable young creature. The little girl who everyone thought was lost and probably dead had been safe all along, sheltered and protected by the same bear who had shown such gentleness to baby Rosalind. Willow spotted the people in the cafeteria and waved enthusiastically, her dirt-streaked face breaking into a huge smile. She said something to the cub in the tone children use when talking to beloved pets, and the young bear responded with a soft huffing sound that could only be described as laughter. "We have to call someone," Jasper said, reaching for his phone. "Her family, the police, the search teams. They need to know she's alive." But before he could dial, Thomas grabbed his arm. "Wait," he said urgently. "Think about what happens next. The moment we call this in, this place will be swarming with people, police, paramedics, reporters, wildlife officials, and those hunters are still out there getting closer every minute." The terrible truth of the situation became clear. Calling for help would save Willow, but it might doom Luna and her cub. The chaos and attention would drive the bears away from their safe haven, possibly right into the hunter's path. But not calling for help meant keeping a missing child's location secret from her desperate family. Dorothy stood up slowly, her face set with determination. That little girl's been safe for 3 days because Luna protected her. But she can't stay in the wild forever. And Luna can't keep dodging hunters with a human child slowing her down. "What are you suggesting?" Meredith asked, though she thought she already knew. "We get them all to safety," Dorothy said. "Together. Willow, Luna, and the cub. But we have to do it before those hunters get close enough to cause trouble." Thomas nodded grimly. "There's an old ranger station about 2 miles north of here. It's been abandoned for years, but it's solid shelter and far enough from the hunting trails to be safe. If we can get Luna to trust us enough to follow, we could lead them there and then call for help." "And how exactly do we convince a wild bear to follow us through the forest?" Jasper asked. The answer came from an unexpected source. Rosalind, who had been listening to the adult conversation with the serious expression babies sometimes wore, suddenly started making the same cooing sounds she had used to communicate with the cub earlier. Her tiny voice carried clearly through the quiet cafeteria, and outside, both the cub and little Willow turned toward the sound. The cub's ears perked up with recognition, and he started moving toward the cafeteria with obvious excitement. Willow followed, chattering to him, in the way children talk to their favorite companions. And behind them both, Luna watched with what could only be described as maternal amusement. "Well, I'll be damned," Thomas chuckled. "Your daughter just solved our communication problem." But their moment of hope was shattered by a sound that made everyone's blood run cold, the distant crack of a rifle shot echoing through the forest. Then another. The hunters had found something to shoot at, and everyone prayed it wasn't another bear family. Luna's reaction was immediate and terrifying. Her maternal instincts went into overdrive as she let out a low, rumbling growl that spoke of ancient protective fury. She moved quickly to position herself between the direction of the gunshots and both cubs, her biological offspring and her adopted human child. Willow, despite her young age, seemed to understand the danger. She moved closer to the cub, and both young creatures looked to Luna for guidance. The mother bear's head swiveled as she assessed their options, her intelligence clearly working to find the safest path. That's when Thomas made a decision that would either save them all or get him killed. He walked slowly toward the cafeteria's patio doors, his hands visible and his movements deliberately non-threatening. "Luna," he called softly, using the same gentle tone he might use with a frightened child. "Luna, girl, it's Thomas. You remember me, don't you?" The massive bear's eyes locked onto his, and for a moment that felt like an eternity, human and animal stared at each other across species lines. Then, incredibly, Luna's posture relaxed slightly. She remembered. The man who had nearly died in the blizzard, the one she had saved, was here. "That's right, girl," Thomas continued, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. "I never forgot what you did for me, and now I want to help you the way you helped me." More gunshots echoed from the forest, closer this time. Luna's anxiety spiked, and she began nudging both cubs toward what she perceived as the safest direction, deeper into the woods. But Thomas knew that path would take them directly toward the hunting party. "No, Luna," he said firmly but gently. "Not that way, this way. Trust me one more time." He gestured toward the trail that led north, toward the abandoned ranger station. For a moment, everything hung in the balance. Would a wild animal trust a human's judgment over her own instincts? Then little Willow did something that changed everything. She walked right up to the patio doors and pressed her small hand against the glass, looking directly at Thomas. "Mr. Bear Lady says you're good people," she said, in the matter-of-fact way that only children can manage. "She told me all about you." The adults in the cafeteria stared in shock. Willow was talking as if she and Luna had been having actual conversations for the past 3 days. As if the barrier between human and animal communication had somehow been bridged by innocence and necessity. "She says she knew my mama before I was born," Willow continued, her young voice carrying impossible wisdom. "She says Mama used to come to the woods when she was sad, and Mr. Bear Lady would watch over her to make sure she was safe." Thomas felt his knees go weak. Willow's mother, Sarah Henderson, had struggled with depression for years before her daughter was born. Thomas remembered seeing her on the forest trails during those difficult times, walking alone for hours. He had never connected her to Luna, but now the pieces were falling into place. Luna hadn't just randomly found and protected a lost child. She had been watching over this family for years, understanding their pain and their healing in ways that defied conventional understanding of animal behavior. Willow wasn't a replacement for Luna's lost cub. She was a continuation of a relationship that had been building across generations. Another gunshot cracked through the air, and this time they could hear voices shouting in the distance. The hunting party was getting closer, and time was running out. "Willow, sweetheart," Thomas called through the glass. "Can you ask Luna to follow us? We know a safe place where the loud noises can't hurt anyone." The little girl turned to Luna and spoke in a mixture of English and sounds that seemed to bridge human language and animal communication. Luna listened intently, her great head tilted in concentration. Then she looked at Thomas again, and in her dark eyes he saw the moment when trust overcame instinct. Luna nudged her cub toward the trail Thomas had indicated, then gently guided Willow in the same direction. She was choosing to trust the human who had recognized her kindness, to believe that not all people meant harm to her family. "Everyone who wants to help, come on," Thomas called to the cafeteria. "But move slowly and stay quiet. We're about to do something that's never been done before, lead a wild bear family to safety." The group that formed was unlike anything Pine Valley had ever seen. Thomas led the way, using his knowledge of the forest to find the safest path. Dorothy followed close behind, her hunting experience helping her read the woods for signs of danger. Meredith carried Rosalind, whose continued cooing seemed to provide comfort to the bear cub. Jasper documented everything on his phone, understanding that this incredible story needed to be preserved. Behind them, at what everyone hoped was a safe distance, Luna walked with her mixed family. Her biological cub stayed close to her massive form, while Willow skipped alongside, occasionally reaching up to touch the mother bear's fur when she needed reassurance. Other cafeteria patrons had scattered to help in different ways. Some went to call off the search teams and redirect them away from the hunting area. Others contacted local wildlife authorities to prepare them for an unprecedented situation. A few brave souls even went to try finding the hunters and convincing them to hold their fire. As they made their way through the forest, more pieces of this incredible puzzle began falling into place. Willow chattered constantly, telling stories about her 3 days with Mr. Bear Lady and Little Bear Brother. She described a hidden den where Luna had kept her warm, showed them scratches on her arms that came from climbing trees with the cub, and pointed out various forest landmarks that Luna had apparently been teaching her to recognize. "She showed me where the good water comes from," Willow explained, pointing to a small stream they were crossing, "and where the sweet berries grow. And she taught me which sounds mean danger and which sounds mean it's okay to play." The child had been receiving a survival education from one of the forest's most experienced inhabitants. Luna hadn't just been protecting Willow, she had been preparing her to thrive in the wild, treating the human child with the same care she would show her own offspring. But as they neared the abandoned ranger station, they encountered a problem none of them had anticipated. The old building wasn't as abandoned as Thomas had thought. Smoke was rising from the chimney, and fresh tire tracks in the dirt suggested recent human activity. "Someone's living here," Dorothy whispered, her hand instinctively moving to the hunting knife on her belt. They had led Luna and the cubs to what they thought was safety, only to discover they might have walked into another dangerous situation. And with the hunters somewhere behind them and unknown people ahead, their options were rapidly disappearing. That's when they heard a voice from inside the building, a woman's voice, calling out in distress. "Help! Please, if anyone's out there, help me! I think I'm having the baby." The day that had started with a simple family breakfast and escalated into an impossible animal rescue had just taken another shocking turn. Someone was giving birth in the abandoned ranger station, and Luna, a mother bear with a profound understanding of protection and nurturing, had just heard the universal call of a mother in need. Luna's reaction was immediate and instinctual. Her massive head lifted, ears twitching as she processed the distressed sounds coming from inside the building. The mother bear's entire demeanor changed from cautious protectiveness to something that could only be described as urgent concern. She had heard that particular tone of distress before, the sound a mother makes when bringing new life into the world. "Oh my God," Meredith whispered, clutching Rosalind closer to her chest. "There's someone in labor in there." Thomas moved closer to the building, his mind racing through the implications. An abandoned ranger station, a woman giving birth alone, hunters in the woods, and a mother bear who seemed to understand human distress better than most humans did. The situation was becoming more complex by the minute. Another cry came from inside, stronger and more desperate than the first. The woman was clearly in active labor, and from the sound of her voice, she was terrified and alone. Luna began moving toward the building with determined steps, her protective instincts overriding any caution about approaching human structures. "Luna, no," Thomas called softly, but the bear wasn't listening. Something deeper than training or caution was driving her forward. The same maternal force that had made her save a dying man in a blizzard, protect a lost child for 3 days, and gently return a baby's pacifier was now compelling her to help another mother in crisis. Willow looked up at the building with the serious expression children wear when they sense something important is happening. "Mr. Bear lady wants to help the crying mama," she said matter-of-factly. "She says all mamas need protecting when babies are coming." The child's words sent chills through the entire group. Willow was translating Luna's intentions as if she could read the bear's mind, and what she was describing defied everything they thought they knew about the boundaries between human and animal understanding. Dorothy stepped forward, her practical nature taking over. "If there's a woman in labor up there, she needs help regardless of anything else. We can figure out the bear situation after we make sure she's okay." But before anyone could decide on their next move, the door to the ranger station opened and a young woman stumbled onto the porch. She was clearly pregnant, very pregnant, and in obvious distress. Her dark hair was matted with sweat. Her clothes were rumpled, and her face was pale with pain and exhaustion. "Please," she gasped, gripping the porch railing. The contractions I can't." Her words were cut off by another powerful contraction that doubled her over with pain. The woman's eyes widened in shock as she saw the group of people emerging from the forest, but her expression turned to absolute terror when she spotted Luna and her cub. She stumbled backward against the door, her breathing becoming rapid and panicked. "Don't be afraid," Thomas called out quickly. "The bear won't hurt you. She's here to help." Even as he said it, Thomas knew how insane it sounded. But Luna's behavior confirmed his words. The massive bear approached the porch slowly, her posture non-threatening, making the same soft rumbling sound she had used to comfort Willow and communicate with baby Rosalind. The pregnant woman stared in disbelief as Luna positioned herself at the base of the porch steps, not climbing up but clearly standing guard. The bear's message was unmistakable. She was there to protect, not to threaten. "I'm dreaming," the woman whispered. "I have to be dreaming. This can't be real." Meredith stepped forward, her maternal instincts taking over. "What's your name, honey?" "How far apart are your contractions?" "Claire," the woman managed between breaths. "Claire Morrison. The contractions are maybe 3 minutes apart now. I've been alone for hours. My car broke down on the forest road, and I found this place and—" Another contraction hit, stronger than the previous ones. Thomas quickly introduced himself and explained who they were, though he left out the more extraordinary details of how they had come to be there with a bear family in tow. "We need to get you help, Claire. Do you have a phone? Can we call someone?" Claire shook her head weakly. No signal. Haven't had signal since yesterday. I was trying to drive myself to the hospital when the car died. I thought I had more time, but the baby's coming now. The situation was becoming critical. A woman in active labor, miles from medical help, with no way to communicate with the outside world. And somewhere in the background, the sound of distant gunshots reminded them that they were all still in potential danger from the hunting party. That's when Luna did something that defied all logic and expectation. She began climbing the porch steps. "Luna, no," Thomas whispered, but the bear ignored him completely. She moved with careful deliberation, her massive paws testing each step to make sure the old wood could support her weight. Claire pressed herself against the door, too exhausted and in too much pain to run. When Luna reached the porch, she didn't approach Claire directly. Instead, she positioned herself near the door and lay down, creating a massive, furry barrier between the vulnerable woman and any potential threats from the forest. Her message was clear. Nothing would get past her to harm the mother or her unborn child. The bear cub, following his mother's lead, curled up near Luna's massive form. Even little Willow seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, sitting quietly on the porch steps and speaking in soothing tones to Claire. "The nice lady bear wants to keep you safe while your baby comes," Willow explained with 4-year-old certainty. "She's really good at taking care of mamas and babies." Claire stared at the impossible scene, her pain and exhaustion making her wonder if she was hallucinating. But another contraction brought her back to immediate reality. "I need to lie down," she gasped. "I need to. This baby is coming whether I'm ready or not." Dorothy and Meredith immediately sprang into action. Dorothy had assisted with enough farm animal births to understand the basics of the process, while Meredith's recent experience with childbirth gave her empathy for what Claire was going through. "Let's get you inside," Dorothy said, supporting Claire's weight. "Thomas, you and Jasper need to figure out how to contact medical help. This baby isn't waiting for a convenient time." As they helped Claire into the ranger station, Luna remained on the porch, her vigilant presence both surreal and oddly comforting. The abandoned building had basic furniture, a couch, some chairs, and thankfully a bedroom with a clean mattress. "How long have you been in labor?" Meredith asked as they helped Claire to the bed. "Since yesterday morning," Claire panted. "At first, I thought it was just false labor, but then my water broke around midnight and the contractions got stronger. I've been trying to time them, trying to stay calm, but I'm scared. This is my first baby, and I'm all alone." The vulnerability in Claire's voice was heartbreaking. Here was a woman facing one of life's most profound experiences in complete isolation. And now she was surrounded by strangers and a wild bear family in an abandoned building in the middle of the forest. "You're not alone anymore," Meredith said firmly. "We're going to help you through this." Outside, they could hear Luna moving around the porch, her heavy footsteps creating a rhythmic patrol pattern. The bear was literally standing guard while a human mother prepared to give birth, displaying a level of cross-species empathy that seemed to transcend the natural order. Thomas had found an old two-way radio in the ranger station and was frantically trying to raise someone, anyone, who could help. Jasper was documenting everything on his phone, understanding that this extraordinary day needed to be recorded. The story of Luna and her protective nature was expanding beyond anything they could have imagined. "I'm getting static," Thomas reported. "The radio works, but I can't reach anyone clear enough to explain the situation." That's when they heard new voices from outside, human voices getting closer. But these weren't the hunters they had been avoiding. These voices carried urgency and organization, the sound of people conducting a search. "That sounds like the search and rescue team," Dorothy said, looking out the window. "They must have expanded the search area for the missing girl." Willow perked up at this. "Are they looking for me?" she asked with innocent curiosity. "I wasn't really lost. Mr. Bear Lady was taking care of me." The complexity of their situation hit everyone at once. When the search team arrived, they would find not only the missing child they had been looking for, but also a woman in labor being protected by a wild bear family. The story would be impossible to believe, even with video evidence. Another contraction gripped Claire, stronger than any before. "Something's happening," she gasped. I think the baby's coming now." Meredith positioned herself to help, while Dorothy gathered clean linens they had found in the ranger station. Outside, Luna's protective pacing continued, and her cub had joined her patrol. Even baby Rosalind seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, staying unusually quiet in her father's arms. That's when the most extraordinary thing yet happened. As Claire's labor intensified and her cries of pain echoed through the building, Luna began making sounds none of them had heard before. They were rhythmic, almost musical vocalizations that seemed to match the timing of Claire's contractions. She's trying to help with the breathing," Meredith realized with amazement. "Luna is coaching her through the contractions." The bear's ancient maternal wisdom was somehow bridging species lines, offering comfort and support to a human mother in the same way she would help one of her own kind. Claire, despite her pain and exhaustion, seemed to find strength in the rhythmic sounds coming from the porch. The voices outside were getting closer, and they could now hear the distinctive sound of search dogs barking. The rescue team was almost upon them, and everything was about to change. But first, Claire Morrison was about to give birth under the protection of a mother bear, who understood that all mothers, human or animal, deserved safety and support during their most vulnerable moments. Just as the first search team member came into view through the trees, Claire let out a final cry of effort and pain. The sound was answered by Luna's deepest, most protective rumble yet, a sound that seemed to announce to the forest that new life had successfully entered the world. The baby's first cry pierced the air just as the search team leader stepped into the clearing and froze in absolute shock at the scene before him. A woman holding a newborn baby, a missing child sitting safely on a porch, and a massive black bear standing sentinel over them all like some kind of ancient guardian spirit. But the biggest shock was yet to come, as the search team leader raised his radio to call in the incredible discovery. A new voice came crackling through the static, a voice that would add one final, impossible twist to this already unbelievable day. "Search Team Alpha, this is Dr. Sarah Henderson. I'm flying in by helicopter with a medical team. We just received word that someone spotted my daughter Willow. Is that confirmed? Is my baby girl really alive?" The search team leader looked from his radio to little Willow, who was waving cheerfully from the porch next to a bear cub, and then to the massive mother bear who had somehow orchestrated this entire miraculous day. He struggled to find words that could possibly explain what he was seeing. Base, this is Alpha Leader. I need you to sit down before I tell you what we found out here, and you're going to want to bring extra medical supplies. We've got the missing child, but we also have a woman who just gave birth, and you're not going to believe who delivered the baby." The search team leader, a grizzled veteran named Captain Reed, who had seen everything in his 25 years of wilderness rescue, found himself completely at a loss for words. His training had prepared him for injured hikers, lost children, even aggressive wildlife encounters. But nothing had prepared him for finding a missing child, sitting peacefully next to a bear cub while a massive mother bear stood guard over a woman holding a newborn baby. Luna hadn't moved from her protective position when the search team emerged from the tree line. If anything, her stance became more alert, more defensive. Her dark eyes assessed each new human arrival, determining whether they posed a threat to the vulnerable mothers and children under her protection. The bear's intelligence was evident in how she positioned herself, close enough to intervene if necessary, but not so close as to appear aggressive. "Captain Reed, what exactly are you seeing out there?" came the crackling voice through the radio. "You're breaking up. Did you say someone delivered a baby?" Captain Reed looked from Luna to little Willow, who was now standing up and waving enthusiastically at the newcomers. "Hi, search people," she called out cheerfully. "I'm not lost anymore. Mr. Bear Lady found me and took really good care of me." The captain's team members were slowly spreading out behind him, their weapons drawn but lowered, unsure how to handle a situation where a dangerous wild animal appeared to be acting as a benevolent guardian. One of the younger officers, a rookie named Martinez, was recording everything on his body camera with shaking hands. "Base, this is Reed," the captain said slowly into his radio. "We have visual confirmation on Willow Henderson. The child appears unharmed and is sitting with a bear cub. There's also an adult female black bear present, approximately 300 pounds, but she's not exhibiting aggressive behavior. In fact, she appears to be protecting a woman who has just given birth." The silence on the radio stretched for several long seconds before Base responded. "Reed, did you just say the bear is protecting someone? Are you experiencing altitude sickness? Heat exhaustion?" Before Captain Reed could respond, another voice cut through the radio chatter, a voice filled with desperate hope and disbelief. "Reed, this is Dr. Henderson in the Medivac chopper. We're 2 minutes out. Please confirm. Is my daughter really there? Is Willow alive?" Thomas stepped forward from the porch, understanding that someone needed to take control of this increasingly complex situation. "Captain Reed, I'm Thomas Creek. I can explain what's happening here, but first, that woman who just gave birth needs immediate medical attention. And the little girl's mother is Dr. Sarah Henderson. She's flying in right now." The sound of helicopter rotors was now audible in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Luna's head tilted upward at the unfamiliar noise, her ears flattening slightly with concern. The bear had never encountered aircraft before, and the loud mechanical sound clearly made her nervous. Willow noticed Luna's distress immediately. She moved closer to the massive bear and placed her small hand on Luna's foreleg. "It's okay, Mr. Bear Lady," she said in her soothing 4-year-old voice. "That's just the flying machine bringing my mama. She's good people, just like you." The interaction between the child and the bear left the entire search team speechless. They were witnessing communication and trust between species that defied scientific understanding. Luna visibly relaxed at Willow's touch, though she remained alert and protective. Inside the ranger station, Claire Morrison was experiencing the overwhelming emotions that come immediately after childbirth. The baby, a healthy girl with a strong voice, was nursing successfully, but Claire was exhausted, frightened, and still processing the surreal circumstances of her daughter's birth. "I can't believe this is real," she whispered to Meredith, who was helping clean up after the delivery. "A bear protected me while I was having my baby. How is that even possible?" Dorothy emerged from the ranger station carrying clean blankets and medical supplies she had found. "Captain Reed," she called out, "this new mother needs proper medical care. The birth went well, but she's been in labor for over 24 hours and she's exhausted." The helicopter noise was getting much louder now, and everyone could see the aircraft approaching through the trees. Luna's anxiety was increasing with the volume, and her cub had moved to hide behind her massive form. The mother bear was torn between her protective instincts and her fear of the unknown threat approaching from the sky. That's when something remarkable happened. Baby Rosalind, who had been quiet throughout most of these events, suddenly began making her cooing sounds again. The familiar, soothing noise seemed to remind Luna of the peaceful interaction they had shared at the cafeteria. The bear's posture relaxed slightly, and she looked toward the baby with what could only be described as gratitude for the comfort. The helicopter circled once before finding a suitable landing spot in the clearing near the ranger station. As the aircraft touched down and the rotors began to slow, a woman in medical scrubs burst from the cabin before the pilot had even given the all-clear signal. Dr. Sarah Henderson ran toward the porch with the desperate speed of a mother who had thought her child was dead. Her blonde hair whipped around her face, and tears were already streaming down her cheeks as she saw Willow sitting safely in the afternoon sunlight. "Willow! Oh my God, Willow!" Sarah cried, rushing forward without any thought for the massive bear standing guard nearby. That's when Luna did something that stopped everyone in their tracks. Instead of retreating or becoming defensive at the approach of another human, the bear stepped aside and made a soft chuffing sound, almost like an introduction. She was presenting Willow to her mother, like a faithful guardian returning a precious charge to her rightful caretaker. The reunion between mother and daughter was overwhelming in its emotional intensity. Sarah dropped to her knees on the porch and gathered Willow into her arms, sobbing with relief and joy. The little girl hugged her mother tightly, but seemed confused by all the tears and drama. "I was never really lost, Mama," Willow said matter-of-factly. "Mr. Bear Lady was taking care of me. She showed me where to find food and how to stay warm and how to be safe in the forest. She's really nice, and her baby bear is my friend now." Sarah looked up through her tears at Luna, and in that moment, recognition dawned on her face. This wasn't just any bear who had protected her daughter. This was the same bear she had encountered years ago during her darkest period, when depression had driven her to take long, solitary walks in these same woods. "Luna?" Sarah whispered, using the name Thomas had told her about during their radio communication. "Is it really you?" The bear's response was immediate and profound. She approached Sarah slowly and gently touched the woman's shoulder with her massive snout. The same gesture of comfort she had offered years ago when Sarah had been crying alone on a forest path, overwhelmed by the struggles of life. The medical team that had arrived with Sarah stood frozen, watching this impossible reunion between a human mother, her rescued child, and the wild animal who had somehow bridged the gap between them. Dr. James Peterson, Sarah's colleague who had come as backup medical support, was recording everything while struggling to understand what he was witnessing. "Sarah," Dr. Peterson said quietly, "are you telling me you know this bear personally?" Before Sarah could answer, another complication arose. The sound of vehicles approaching could be heard through the forest. Multiple engines, driving fast and with purpose. Captain Reed immediately recognized the sound. "That's the hunters," he said grimly into his radio. "We've got a hunting party approaching the area, and they don't know about our situation here." Thomas felt his blood run cold. After everything they had been through, after all the miracles and connections and new life, Luna and her cub were still in danger from people who would see them only as targets. "We have to stop them," he said urgently. "They can't see Luna and the cub. After everything that's happened today, those bears can't be hurt." But Luna had already heard the approaching vehicles and identified them as a threat. Her maternal instincts kicked into high gear as she moved to position herself between the approaching danger and all the vulnerable creatures she had taken under her protection. Her own cub, little Willow, the new baby, and their human mothers. Captain Reed was already on his radio, trying to contact the hunting party and warn them off. But the hunters weren't responding to official channels. They were operating under their legal permits and had no reason to expect wildlife officials in their hunting area. That's when Dr. Sarah Henderson made a decision that would change everything. As a respected physician and a mother who had just been reunited with her child thanks to Luna's protection, she understood that this story was bigger than any individual moment. She stood up, still holding Willow, and faced the direction of the approaching vehicles. "Captain Reed," she said with the authority of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions, "I want you to call in every favor you have. Contact the governor's office, the state wildlife department, the media, everyone. This bear family has just demonstrated something that science says is impossible. They've shown cross-species empathy, protection, and communication that could change how we understand animal intelligence." The sound of the hunting vehicles was getting closer, and Luna was becoming more agitated. Her protective stance was shifting toward something more aggressive, as she prepared to defend her mixed family of humans and bears against the approaching threat. "But more than that," Sarah continued, her voice rising with emotion, "Luna saved my daughter's life. She protected a woman during childbirth. She's shown kindness and intelligence that makes her more human than some humans I know. I will not let her be hunted like a common animal." Claire Morrison emerged from the ranger station, still weak from childbirth but carrying her newborn daughter. "What's happening?" she asked, hearing the tension in everyone's voices. "There are hunters coming," Meredith explained quickly. "The same ones we were trying to avoid earlier. They don't know about Luna and what she's done." Claire looked at Luna with tears in her eyes. "She protected me," she said simply. "When I was alone and scared and having my baby, she stood guard and kept me safe. No one can hurt her. I won't let them." The first hunting vehicle came into view through the trees, and everyone could see the mounted rifle racks and camouflage-clad figures inside. Luna's growl was low and dangerous now, and her cub pressed close to her side, sensing his mother's readiness for battle. But what happened next would become the most extraordinary moment in a day already filled with impossibilities. As the hunting vehicle stopped and 3 men in orange vests climbed out with their weapons, little Willow broke away from her mother and ran directly toward them. "Stop!" she shouted with the fearless authority that only a 4-year-old could possess. "You can't hurt my friends. Mr. Bear Lady is good. She saved me and the new baby mama." The hunters froze in confusion as a small child appeared from nowhere, defending wild bears with passionate determination. Behind her, Luna stepped forward, not in aggression but in support of the brave little girl who was trying to protect her. And in that moment, with a missing child defending a wild bear family, a newborn baby in her mother's arms, and a helicopter full of medical equipment sitting in a forest clearing, everyone present understood they were witnessing something that would be talked about for generations to come. The lead hunter, a man named Jake Morrison, lowered his rifle and stared in disbelief at the scene before him. "What in the hell is going on here?" he asked, his voice filled with confusion and growing concern. That's when Captain Reed stepped forward with his official authority. "Mr. Morrison, I'm going to need you and your party to lower your weapons immediately. You're looking at the most extraordinary wildlife encounter in recorded history, and I'll be damned if anyone's going to ruin it with a bullet." But as Jake Morrison stared at the protective mother bear, something in his face changed. A look of recognition, then shock, then something approaching wonder. "Luna," he whispered, echoing the name he had heard Sarah use. Is that the bear who found my wife?" The final piece of this incredible puzzle was about to fall into place, and everyone was about to discover that the connections between Luna and the humans she had touched went even deeper than anyone had imagined. Jake Morrison's rifle slipped from his hands and clattered to the ground as the full weight of realization hit him. The bear, standing protectively in front of the ranger station, wasn't just any bear. This was the same magnificent creature who had stood guard while his wife Claire gave birth to their daughter just hours ago. "Claire!" he called out, his voice breaking with emotion. "Claire, is that you?" Claire Morrison appeared in the doorway of the ranger station, still pale and exhausted, but holding their newborn daughter with fierce maternal pride. When she saw her husband among the hunters, tears began streaming down her face. "Jake," she sobbed. "I thought I was going to die out here alone, but she protected me. Luna protected our baby girl." The other hunters stared in stunned silence as Jake Morrison, a man they knew as tough and practical, broke down completely. He stumbled forward, dropping his hunting gear, and fell to his knees on the porch where Luna stood sentinel. "I came out here to hunt bears," he whispered, looking up at Luna with tears in his eyes. "I came out here to kill something like you. But you saved my wife. You saved my daughter." Luna looked down at the kneeling man with those intelligent dark eyes that had seen so much, understood so much. Slowly, deliberately, she lowered her massive head and gently touched Jake's shoulder with her snout. The same gesture of comfort she had given to Sarah years ago, to Claire during labor, and to Thomas after his rescue. The gesture broke something open in Jake Morrison's chest. This powerful hunter who had spent his life seeing wildlife as targets suddenly understood that he was in the presence of something sacred. A wild creature who had chosen compassion over instinct, protection over self-preservation, love over fear. "I'm sorry," he whispered to Luna. "I'm so sorry I came here to hurt you." Captain Reed stepped forward, his voice gentle but official. "Mr. Morrison, given the circumstances, I think it's safe to say this hunting expedition is over." Jake nodded, wiping tears from his weathered face. "Not just over," he said firmly. "I'm done hunting. Forever. How could I ever raise a weapon against animals again, knowing what Luna did for my family?" His hunting companions, witnessing this extraordinary scene, quietly began unloading their weapons and packing their gear. Word of what had happened here would spread through the hunting community, and many would reconsider what it meant to share the world with creatures capable of such profound kindness. Dr. Sarah Henderson, still holding Willow, stepped closer to Luna. "I know you probably don't understand human words," she said softly, "but I need you to know that you've changed everything. Not just for my family, but for everyone here. You've shown us what real protection looks like, what real love looks like." Luna's response was to gently nuzzle Willow one final time, as if saying goodbye to the child she had protected. Then she turned to her own cub, who had been watching all these human interactions with curious eyes. Thomas stepped forward, understanding that this magical day was drawing to a close. "Luna, girl," he said quietly, "you've done something extraordinary today. You've connected worlds that most people thought could never meet. But now you need to take your little one somewhere safe, somewhere peaceful." As if she understood, Luna began moving away from the ranger station, her cub following close behind. But she paused at the edge of the clearing and looked back at the remarkable group of humans she was leaving behind. Little Willow broke away from her mother and ran toward Luna one last time. "Will I see you again, Mr. Bear Lady?" she asked with the innocent hope of childhood. Luna made one final soft rumbling sound, not a goodbye, but a promise. A promise that she would always be watching over the children of Pine Valley, always ready to protect those who needed protection, always choosing love over fear. And then she was gone, melting into the forest with her cub, like shadows returning to their natural world. The clearing fell silent, except for the gentle sounds of newborn baby Morrison making soft nursing noises in her mother's arms. Everyone stood quietly, processing what they had experienced, understanding that they had been part of something that would be remembered long after they were gone. Captain Reed was the first to speak. "I've been in search and rescue for 25 years, he said slowly. "I've seen avalanches and floods and forest fires. I've pulled people from wrecked cars and collapsed buildings. But I have never, in my entire career, witnessed anything like what happened here today." Dr. Peterson, who had been documenting everything, lowered his camera with shaking hands. "The scientific community isn't going to believe this," he said. "Even with video evidence, they're going to say it's impossible." "Let them say it's impossible," Dorothy said firmly. "We know what we saw. We know what Luna did. And more importantly, we know what it means." Meredith, still holding baby Rosalind, looked around at the group of people who had started the day as strangers and were now bonded by an experience that transcended normal human understanding. "What it means," she said softly, "is that love isn't limited by species. Protection isn't limited by biology. Compassion isn't limited by the boundaries we think exist between wild and civilized." In the months that followed, the story of Luna and the Pine Valley Miracle, as it came to be known, spread around the world. The video footage went viral within hours, inspiring millions of people to reconsider their relationship with wildlife. Conservation efforts increased dramatically as people realized that animals were capable of far more complex emotions and behaviors than previously understood. Jake Morrison became one of the most vocal advocates for wildlife protection in the state, using his story to convert other hunters into conservationists. The Morrison family established the Luna Foundation, dedicated to protecting bear habitats and educating people about the intelligence and emotional capacity of wild animals. Dr. Sarah Henderson published research papers about interspecies communication and empathy, with Luna's behavior becoming a cornerstone case study for animal psychology. Willow, as she grew older, became a powerful voice for wildlife protection, often speaking about her 3 days in the forest and the bear who became her guardian. Thomas Creek was hired by the state as a wildlife consultant, using his unique relationship with Luna to establish new protocols for human-wildlife interactions. The abandoned ranger station was renovated and turned into the Luna Wildlife Education Center, where Claire Morrison's daughter would eventually take her first steps. But perhaps the most beautiful part of the story was what happened every year on the anniversary of that extraordinary day. Families would gather at the Pine Valley Cafeteria, bringing their children to hear the story of Luna and to look hopefully toward the forest. And sometimes, just sometimes, observers would spot a familiar large shape at the tree line, watching over the human families with protective eyes. Luna never approached the humans again, but she never stopped watching over them either. She had learned that day that not all humans were threats to be avoided or predators to be feared. Some humans were worth protecting, worth caring for, worth loving, and the humans had learned something equally profound, that in a world often divided by fear and misunderstanding, a mother bear had shown them what it really meant to love without boundaries, to protect without prejudice, and to bridge differences with compassion. The last entry in Thomas Creek's Wildlife Journal, written on the 5th anniversary of the Pine Valley Miracle, simply read, "Saw Luna today at the edge of Willow's birthday party. She's raised 3 more cubs since that day, and each one shows the same gentle curiosity about humans. Love, it turns out, is something that can be taught, even in the wild, especially in the wild." Baby Rosalind, now a walking, talking 5-year-old, still carried the same pink pacifier that had started it all. And sometimes, when she played in her backyard that bordered the forest, she would make the same cooing sounds she had made as a baby, and sometimes, carried on the wind, she would hear a familiar rumbling response, a mother bear's voice reminding her that some friendships transcend all boundaries, and some love lasts forever. The Pine Valley Cafeteria still serves pancakes every morning, and the staff still keeps the patio doors open when the weather is nice. Not because they expect magical visits from forest creatures, but because they learned that day that keeping doors open, literal and metaphorical ones, allows for miracles to happen. And in the deep woods beyond Pine Valley, a mother bear continues to raise her cubs with an unusual lesson: that the greatest strength comes not from claws or teeth or intimidating size, but from choosing kindness when fear would be easier, choosing protection when retreat would be safer, and choosing love when the world gives you every reason to choose otherwise. Luna had taught an entire community that the best way to honor the bonds between mother and child, protector and protected, is to extend that same fierce love to all who need it, regardless of species, regardless of difference, regardless of the boundaries that seem to separate us. In the end, a simple pink pacifier had fallen to the floor of a small-town cafeteria. But what rose from that moment was something much greater: proof that love, in its purest form, recognizes no limits, knows no boundaries, and creates connections that can heal the world, one gentle touch at a time,